Today is the 8th anniversary of the Supreme Court decision that legalized same-sex marriage. And I was thinking of an article I wrote 4 years ago, which I will put in the description, and you can find a deeper discussion of this. But this is one of those topics to where people are very polarized. Uh, in that article, I came up with a solution that I think could, if both sides would listen, would be satisfactory to both sides, or at least most within the support or oppose same-sex marriage side. And it's privatizing marriage. And I know you got to be careful with talking about subjects like this because a few months ago I did in a video on talking about abortion, and it's like doesn't matter what you say, yay or nay, it's like people start dropping off when you start talking about subjects like that. So I'm going to be very careful here. And I just let you know that this is a position that's what you'd call a third way position. It's libertarian, and it's something that both sides would mutually benefit from. So just keep that in mind. The idea of privatizing marriage is basically saying, why is the government in marriage anyway? One thing that you'll commonly hear is that marriage is basically a domestic contract. And it's a domestic contract that gives you certain rights and responsibilities under the law. And this was initially used to support the concept of same-sex marriage. It was popular probably a few decades ago when the argument for same-sex marriage was newer. People would put forward the idea that it's just a domestic contract establishing legal rights and responsibilities. And it's kind of where civil unions became more acceptable because that's what it was trying to do. And so obviously the question is, if it's just a domestic contract with rights and responsibilities, as far as the state's concerned, why don't we just make it a domestic contract? Why don't we just take some type of domestic contract and give all the rights, responsibilities of marriage within that document and make it an actual contract? Not something that you have to go get a license for, not something you have to have solemnized necessarily in a ceremony, but something you just sit down and you draw up in a contract. If that's what the state is doing, why don't we just have a private contract? And mine specifically was for what I call the domestic relations agreement, to where a couple, any two people who are adults, would specify what rights and responsibilities they want. And through statute, you could essentially have it all encompassing, where you could get all of the same rights and responsibilities as marriage, or you could specify which ones you want or don't want and tailor it. And this idea of a domestic relations agreement, in many respects, would function kind of like a civil union for everyone. That if you wanted to marry, you go do that privately, but it essentially functioned like a civil union. And you could call it whatever you want. You could call it a marriage contract, you could call it a civil union contract, domestic partnership agreement. There was nothing magical in the name. It's just recognized as a domestic relations agreement. And though it's like a civil union, it's different in the respect that, one, you don't have to get a license from the government, which is permission. And two, you don't have to go through a ceremony like marriage. It's just a private contract. And the second difference between what I'm talking about in this and in a civil union is that it's more flexible. Because it's a contract, we would give people the ability to tailor what they want in it. I mean, within certain bounds, you can't violate public policy, and you can't have like things that are akin to slavery or prostitution or things like that. But you would give a great deal more flexibility that you just can't do under current marriage laws, or you can't do with parallel civil union agreements. So it would give you that. And think about it this way. It's kind of like legal uh, legal documents that we already have today, like wills, trusts, power of attorneys, where any two people can come in and make an agreement, or you can will yourself property to certain people and things like that. It's similar to those kind of agreements. Obviously, the difference is it's all encompassing. So it's a lot more encompassing than just what a will would do, or a trust, or a power of attorney, or something like that. So it's more encompassing. So you see aspects of other legal documents that have similarities to it, and you see aspects to a civil union, but there's some differences. And I think the point of privatizing marriage for a lot of us, beyond resolving the question of same-sex marriage, yay or nay, is I think for a lot of people, marriage means a lot of different things. For some people, it's deeply religious. Others, it's not. For some people, it's very intimate and personal. And it's kind of odd when you think about it. You're taking this thing that has a great deal of spiritual or personal meaning to you and saying, okay, go get a license, go to this justice of the peace person and have them do a ceremony. And you're like, well, I really don't want that. You know, it doesn't really fit with what I ultimately believe. It's not really what I want. I don't see the due deference in what the state is trying to do with what they're calling marriage and what I believe marriage is. Well, this sort of resolves that, because you get the legal rights and responsibilities in your document, but then you can privately marry and go do what you want. And this is also the point I was talking about in terms of this document doesn't have magic words. It's domestic relations agreement. So you can call it a marriage contract, but in essence, what's being recognized by the state is the agreement and the rights and responsibilities those two individuals are trying to share with each other. So it's not a blessing on a marriage, and it's not a renunciation of the marriage. It's sort of neutral on it in that sense. And I think that gives every individual, whether you're religious or not, every community, every church or place of worship, a lot more freedom to define what marriage is for them. And because these documents are only a combination of rights and responsibilities and isn't marriage, quote unquote, any two individuals could enter into it, because it's not a blessing on what they may or may not do in terms of sexual relations. It's not a blessing in any respect like what we tend to think of with marriage. So you could have a domestic relations agreement with a close relative. It's not a big deal, because it's just a legal arrangement, so you can create a trust with family members. You can create a power of attorney for someone that's closely related to you. It's no big deal. Well, it's the same way here. You're just combining a whole set of rights and responsibilities normally associated with marriage in a legal contract, in a domestic contract. So it's even more liberating than what you'd get with a civil union, because a lot of times when they would do civil unions, they would specify that you couldn't be closely related. It had the same kind of restrictions as marriage, because marriage has those kind of things, because obviously if you're recognizing a marriage, you don't necessarily want to be giving a blessing to incestuous relationships or anything like that. But this doesn't have anything to do, this kind of domestic relation agreement has nothing to do with blessing a marriage or blessing what they may or may not do in the bedroom. It's simply legal rights and responsibilities. When you understand that, it's like, whoa, why didn't we do this before? And I answer in the article a lot of potential objections people have. The state through marriage protects women and children. Well, it's like it used to do that, but a lot of the protections that women and children get, in many cases, they don't need the marriage anyway. Take like a child that's born out of a marital relationship. Well, the courts have basically already given equal rights to children who are born out of wedlock to those born within a marriage. So that really doesn't matter that much anymore. And in terms of things like giving women spousal support, things like that, courts are more reluctant to do that anyway at this point in time. But the thing is with these domestic relations agreements, you could specify in the event that the marriage breaks up, one of the spouses, possibly the wife, but it could be the other way, would get spousal support. And you can specify things like if adultery occurs, there will be a financial penalty of such and such, which you can't currently do under existing marriage laws. But what I'm envisioning with my domestic relations agreements, you would have the freedom to do that. So these DRAs would actually, if anything, potentially protect women and children more than what currently exists under marriage. And one of the other objections is, well, marriage as an institution, when the state recognizes it, makes it stronger. And I think at this point, I don't think that's necessarily true. Marriage has been, to some extent, weakened by government involvement, things like no-fault laws, no-fault divorce laws. But with a domestic relations agreement, you could specify and make it more difficult to divorce. You could set up penalties for breaking the agreement. And essentially, you wouldn't need a divorce because you just need to follow the contract and separate out property. But for a dissolution of the relationship, you could specify penalties, which would actually strengthen the legal bond that the two individuals have beyond what current marriage laws have. So, if anything, this would strengthen the relationship rather than weaken it. And like I said, is marriage itself predates the state and isn't dependent upon the state for its existence. So I think that answers that question. There was another question about, well, is this really just an attempt to undermine gay rights and equality for gay people? And I don't believe that it is, because within this arrangement, gay couples, straight couples, any two individuals really would have the power to establish exactly what they wanted in terms of rights and responsibilities. So gay couples essentially would be on equal footing with any other couple. And beyond that, gay couples, along with everyone else, would have greater flexibility to put in the document what they want in the relationship. And I think that would actually empower gay people as well as everyone else in a way that they currently don't enjoy under current marriage laws. And one thing to think about too is, what if you have two people that want to be together, that want a relationship, but don't necessarily want to fall under marriage? That's kind of why some people in a few states will opt for a civil union or opt for a domestic partnership if that's available, because they don't really want to be recognized as married. Maybe they have a problem with the institution of marriage. Or maybe this could exist too, is maybe they are a gay couple and they believe that they should be together, but they're not comfortable with the concept of calling it a marriage. Maybe they think that's something they just don't want for whatever reason, and that's fine. But they do want legal protections and so forth. And so this would offer an option where you could get the same legal rights and responsibilities without having to define it as this or that. And that would empower people who just don't want to refer to it as a marriage, who want to refer to it as something else. And that puts you in the driver's seat in that situation. Well, I think that there's a lot of advantages beyond just resolving the question of same-sex marriage that we have with this document. So check out the article that I wrote. It's in the description, and I hope you really enjoy it. Thank you.